On June 28, 1914, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb named Gavrilo Princip stepped off a pavement in Sarajevo and fired 2 shots. The man he killed was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Within 6 weeks, Europe was at war. Before it ended, 17 million people were dead. To understand what happened in Sarajevo, you have to understand the world that existed before it. Europe in 1914 was a continent of great powers bound together by a web of alliances so rigid that any conflict between 2 nations threatened to drag in all the rest. Austria-Hungary was a multi-ethnic empire struggling to hold itself together. To its south and east, the Kingdom of Serbia was growing in power and ambition after victories in the Balkan Wars. And running through all of it was a rising tide of nationalism. Serb, Croat, Czech, Slovene, each people pressing against the seams of an imperial order that was already fraying. Franz Ferdinand was not a popular man. He was conservative, often arrogant, and at odds with Emperor Franz Joseph's court on several issues, but he was the heir. And on June 28, he traveled to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, a province Austria-Hungary had annexed just 6 years earlier, to observe military maneuvers. The date itself was significant. June 28 was Vidovdan, St. Vitus's Day, the anniversary of the 1389 Battle of Kosovo, the defining moment of Serbian national memory. For Serbian nationalists, the Archduke's visit on that day was a provocation. A group of 7 conspirators from the Black Hand, a Serbian nationalist secret society, positioned themselves along the Archduke's motorcade route. The first attempt failed. A grenade thrown at the Archduke's car bounced off and exploded under the vehicle behind, wounding several members of the party. Franz Ferdinand continued to the town hall, where he received a formal greeting. He was furious. He then insisted on visiting the wounded in hospital. His motorcade set off again, but the driver took a wrong turn, stopped to reverse, and stalled the engine directly in front of Gavrilo Princip, who had given up and was standing outside a delicatessen. Princip raised his pistol and fired twice. Franz Ferdinand was shot in the jugular. His wife Sophie, who had placed herself in front of the Archduke to protect him, was shot in the abdomen. Both were dead within the hour. In Vienna, the response was not grief so much as calculation. Austria-Hungary's leadership saw the assassination as an opportunity, a pretext to crush Serbian power once and for all. Germany, Austria-Hungary's main ally, offered what became known as the blank check, unconditional support for whatever action Vienna chose to take. Emboldened, Austria-Hungary issued Serbia an ultimatum so severe it was designed to be rejected. Serbia accepted nearly all of it. Austria-Hungary declared war anyway. What followed was the machinery of European alliances grinding into motion. Russia, a Slavic power and Serbia's protector, began mobilizing its forces. Germany, bound by treaty to Austria-Hungary and alarmed by Russia's mobilization, declared war on Russia and then France. To attack France, Germany executed the Schlieffen Plan, a rapid strike through neutral Belgium. That brought Britain into the war, bound by treaty to protect Belgian neutrality. Within 5 weeks of 2 gunshots in a Sarajevo street, every great power in Europe was at war. The First World War lasted 4 years and 3 months. It consumed the lives of approximately 10 million soldiers and 7 million civilians. Empires that had stood for centuries, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, the German Empire, collapsed. The map of Europe was redrawn entirely. And in the ashes of the peace that followed, in the humiliation and economic ruin imposed on Germany, the conditions for an even more catastrophic conflict were being laid. The world that existed before June 28, 1914 was gone. The certainties of the 19th century, the balance of power, the concert of Europe, the assumption that great nations would manage their rivalries through diplomacy, died with Franz Ferdinand in a Sarajevo street. What replaced them was a 20th century defined by total war, revolution, and genocide. 2 shots from a young man who had once failed his entry exams to a Serbian nationalist group changed everything. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is perhaps the most consequential act of political violence in modern history. It did not cause the war alone. The alliances, the arms races, the nationalism, the imperial rivalries, all of those were already there. But it was the spark. It tells us that the systems human beings build to manage power and conflict are always more fragile than they appear, and it reminds us that history does not always announce itself. Sometimes it happens on a street corner, in an instant, when a driver takes a wrong turn.